So Brian, what time do you expect the students to join in the game here?
I think they're I think they're joining up now. We're about to get started.
And we're going to start in 5, 4, 3.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's town hall. My name is Brian, and with me today is Marcel Sarzen. He's the founder of AGL Technology. And welcome, Marcel. Glad to have you here.
Pleasure to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So I guess what I want to do is get an idea of your background and how you ended up, moving through your career and ended up working with turkeys, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's always kind of interesting when you first have people hear about where you're playing in your space. But my background is engineering. I'm actually a Georgia Tech mechanical engineer undergrad, and then a master's degree to just general engineering. Got caught up in probably the IT consulting space with Accenture for about 6-7 years, and then got caught up in startups. And this first startup I did was probably in 96, 97, and have been in that kind of mode of either being in a startup mode or running my own company through that entire time period. So a strong technology background, a little bit of a fearless learner. I'll give myself that. I'll have people say, Marcel, how'd you ever get to turkeys? Or how did you ever work with dogs? Just kind of a passion space of animals is kind of a fun space to get to work in. But, go back to my Accenture days, I was definitely working in the more hard, heavy, dealing with utilities, dealing with banking, dealing with travel transportation, and just the chance to get to work with animals was a fun space that's evolved over the last, I'm going to say 20 years that I've been playing in it.
Well, I know in a previous conversation that we had, you told me how passionate you were about animals in general. And although you might not have known it originally, working with animals is kind of maybe almost a destiny for you, right?
Yeah, no, this is, animals going all the way through my life have always been important to me. And I've always told people that if I had not been an engineer at Georgia Tech, I would have gone to my arch enemy, University of Georgia, and become a veterinarian. And the fun part is I'm getting to blend those two worlds. I mean, sometimes you never think, how's an engineer going to go work in the animal space? And it's amazing where our careers can take us. And just, a number of probably the, listeners we have in the audience here, you don't know where these things are going to take you. And it's always kind of an interesting ride, a little bit of a random walk at times, but you keep stacking all these life experiences and capabilities that you build in your career. And then suddenly you get, in my case, it was I got to go work in the perfect space that really blends together for me. So you think about between an engineer and animals, what really is kind of a fun tech space to be in is agricultural technology. So it's ag tech, and looking at things of how you use either the cloud and sensors to do measurements on animals, to measure health, welfare, even sustainability. Just a lot of really fun things when I started mixing together that animal space mixed with the sensor space.
So another perfect example of not really knowing what you're going to end up working with, you've got an engineer background, and yet here you are dealing a lot with sound, which is not necessarily your background, is it?
Yeah, no, this goes back to, I like the term fearless learner. In fact, I like hiring fearless learners. And Brian, I think you and I talked probably about 6 months ago, and I'd say, Brian, I'm looking for some adult supervision in this space. And all of us, we can't know everything. It's, you have to find those people you can go lean on who know a space and get the right team put together. And that's what I've been able to do on my sound side here. So, in fact, kind of a thing that I've kind of coined in our ag tech space here is that, sound and artificial intelligence are the Swiss Army knife of sensors, because the ability to almost look at all sorts of different animal behavioral things using sound and then turn that to understanding health, welfare, operational events, different things. It's no different than you think about, those that go on Facebook and you start tagging pictures of people, and suddenly Facebook or, whatever the social media platform is, it learns who that person is. Well, the same thing happens here with sound, where you start training it to learn about different key things. Like, for example, a turkey that's coughing, a turkey that's sneezing, a turkey that's doing different vocalizations that they're indicative of stress. So it's no different than tagging yourself in a photo and suddenly it learns who Marcel is or who Bryan is. And when you bring up Facebook next time, you can now see, oh, here's Bryan and the last 10 years of pictures. We found him real quick. Well, the same thing is true with sound, the ability to start tagging sounds and then apply those sounds to operational areas to actually bring value in a space where you're looking over the health of animals, the welfare of animals, or even the sustainability play.
Awesome. So I kind of envision it as being the Wild West of communication with animals almost. I see this as like the early stages, hopefully, of one day being able to, not necessarily having a dialogue with animals, but at least be able to understand them to the point where we can live in a more united and peaceful world with them, rather than the abuse that a lot of them seem to be exposed to, unfortunately. So
yes, funny you mentioned the ability to the concept of being able to talk to an animal. When I was first trying to name the company, going back, we first started the company back in 2013. I was like, I want to be Dr. Doolittle. And you guys may think of Eddie Murphy, but this is before Eddie Murphy was along. The Dr. Doolittle was actually a veterinarian who had the ability to talk to the animals and communicate with them. So what we're trying to do is you're trying to, using the data coming from these different sensors, whether it's sound, whether it's vision, whether it's other sensors, is give them a voice that says, I'm either, and this relates back to another project I was involved with in the last, from 2013 to 2018, I was focusing in the dog space. And it was a sensor called Vetrex that goes on a dog's collar, and it quantifies behaviors. So think about the ability to have your dog say, I'm itchy, I've got a dermatological issue going on, and you can see it in the data, and you have a mobile app that allows you to see that the dog is, I give him a medication or I give him a bath, and I can see that he's no longer itching anymore. Same thing on dogs with ear infections. We're also using that same sensor, using AI with that sensor, the ability to see that dog was shaking its head. So think about a dog with ear infections. And it was interesting, as we were developing this application, again called Vetrex, we had people say, okay, really what I want to know, is my dog happy?
yeah.
Is my dog living the fullness of his life? And the ability to kind of measure that and say, hey, a happiness factor for your dog. I think it's, all of us would kind of find that interesting, and with our pets are almost like extended family members.
Yeah, and I think that translates well to, the side of farming that deals with food products. So whether we like to admit it or not, we eat meat, and that does come from somewhere. And I know that food production relies on a happy and healthy animal for the best tasting meat. Obviously, money is a concern, so that's not always taken into account. But the fact that there are companies out there that are at least trying to make sure that the animals are as stress-free as possible is a good thing. I know your original, I think some of your early trials involved cattle. How did you transition from cattle to turkeys, and was there much of a difference in the way that you collated data?
Yeah, no, there's different technologies you put on. So on cattle, you actually put an accelerometer. Think of it almost like a necklace that has an accelerometer that goes on the collar, and you're profiling movement of an animal. And think no different than if you're a human being who gets sick and you don't want to move much, and you're not going to the kitchen, you're just laying in bed. While cattle, you can almost profile the same kind of capabilities. They're in kind of a pen. There might be 50 to 100 animals in a pen, and an animal that just goes to the side and stays put. And then when feed is put in the pen and all the other animals go forward to eat, and do their normal, movement activities, you can quickly start profiling movement to be a proxy into health of that animal that's off to the side, who's not moving and not interacting with the other animals. Becomes kind of a flashing light of an animal that's showing early morbidity. And what you want to do is catch early morbidity before it progresses to real sickness and potentially death of the animal. So the ability to detect that. So let's go forward here. I mean, when we were trying to put think about trying to put a necklace with a sensor on it on a cow, it's pretty dangerous work. And that's one thing I really like about sound. When we go into a turkey house or a chicken house, just think about, and think of a poultry house that we go into. It's roughly around 600 feet long, maybe 80 feet wide. And we're dropping microphones down the line of that house on one of the edges of the house. And you're basically miking up maybe every 80 to 100 feet a microphone going down that road. So really, you didn't have to put anything on the animal. All you're doing is you're listening. You're listening to it no different than as if you and I were getting sick. And if we first start, sneezing a little bit, coughing, you want to hear that. And then you want to catch it early. And think of almost like a daycare where you got a bunch of kids, your kids are in daycare. That first kid comes in coughing. Ideally you want to quarantine that guy off to the side and get that youngster out of the way before contagion strikes the entire daycare. Well, think about in a poultry environment where that disease, the respiratory disease, comes in and spreads across. So what we're trying to do with sound now is sampling in that facility, the ability to hear those, that coughing, the sneezing, they call snicking also. We're trying to pick off and train on those specific sounds and then we run these models right there with compute that's at that house. It's called Edge AI. So it's AI at the edge, at the farm, that then processes those sounds and then will, collect it. It will upload that data of an animal starting or a house starting to break from disease. And then you want to push notifications out to the farmer and to the veterinarian for that facility to then try to address it and calm it down before it contagions across the entire population.
That's pretty incredible. The fact that the algorithm is able to isolate that snick, as you call it, from the rest of the gobbles that are in that house, because I'm not in a turkey house, but I've been in a chicken house, and it is deafening. How were you able to train your AI to be able to identify those sounds in the mass of acoustic information that's coming at it at any given time?
So there's different techniques out there, from convolutional neural nets to recurring neural networks too. The ability to, first of all, you got just no different than like I talked about earlier on Facebook, where you were able to train an algorithm to learn your face versus my face, and you start tagging enough of those. So go back to tagging clips, sound clips. Maybe they're 2-second sound clips. Do I hear a sneeze in this? Do I hear a cough in this? Do I hear stress for animals? And you're looking for opportunities to go find the data at times where maybe it's not so much chaos. So Bryan, just like you said, when you walk in a poultry house in the middle of the day and it's 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the early or late morning, it's chaos in there, and there's ventilation running. There's a lot of noise. So how do you deal with it? You're doing specific proprietary filtering techniques to knock down some of these frequencies to remove it from it. And then you're basically sampling these sounds throughout that entire house and taking it through those convolutional neural nets that you trained it for. And that convolutional neural net does not look that much different than your Facebook or any other social media network where you're training it to recognize my face, your face, daughter's face, whatever. So it's similar strategies, and along with advanced filtering to get some of the junk out of there and clean up that signal. So at the end of the day, sound is data. It is data, and you're teaching that convolutional neural net on how to pick off those specific events.
That's really interesting. So essentially there's a baseline to go off of, and over time that baseline becomes more and more predictable. So if there are any quirks or snakes in there, it makes it a lot easier for the algorithm to pick that off. Is it up to the algorithm to isolate a specific turkey, or does the farmer then realize what quadrant the sick animal is in, and then try to isolate the rest of the turkeys, and then they go in one by one to see which one is sick? How does that work?
Yeah, so the big thing to understand when you're dealing with any of these animal production facilities, you're dealing, turkey toms is 10,000 birds in that 600 by 80 foot house. So you're dealing with, large collections of animals. So you're not trying to identify, this turkey over here in the corner right now is the one that's sick. It's more so you're hearing across the population, maybe the start of it. Okay. And you can, you have locality on all the microphones, so you know where they're located. You could tell them to go look in this area, but at the end of the day, it's more so you know that it's starting. You start seeing, you think about your data, you start seeing it, it's slowly ramping up. You've got a small amount of coughs going on, then you start seeing it ramping. As you start seeing it accelerate, that's when the trigger becomes that this is something that's not just a onesie twosie. You want to know that you've got some level of contracted respiratory disease or disease going on, and then you're going to trigger on that. So you're never looking at single animals, you're looking at a subset of a collection of animals is what you're trying to do. And catch it there and try to catch it as early as you can, and then treat it and try to knock it down.
That's really interesting for me to hear, because the last time we talked, a mistake that I was making was trying to come up with a solution for isolating specific turkeys that might have been stressed or injured or what have you. And really, the more I thought about it, the more it became an impossible solution. There's so many different data points, as you call them, to be able to isolate one in particular without thousands of parabolic microphones pointed at each individual turkey.
Yeah.
I mean, that just seems, doesn't seem very, it's not an ideal circumstance, is it?
Yeah, and you get to where, you got to come up with there's a balance here between what is cost effective and, reasonable to implement too. Because let's face it, if we give someone a $100,000 solution to implement in a house, it'll never happen. It'll never make it into the marketplace. So, we've looked at ways to, number one, try to get a good sampling in the house. We are trying to preempt things as, through those algorithms in a quick manner. And I think we can get to, a high amount of value very rapidly with just the set that we're doing that keeps it simple and repeatable and very installable. Something that you're just going on the side of the house, you're putting up. Another thing that we're actually bringing in, which you may have someone in your audience who probably knows a better solution to this than I do, but we're getting into wireless microphones. And I talked about this house that's 600 feet long, the ability to put microphones, again, every 80 to 100 feet, but you've got a microphone down here at the tail end of that house who's got to be able to send data all the way up 800 feet plus through a house that's in the tough environment, Bryan, that you talked about. You've got a lot of noise in there. You've got different challenges. But we have a partner here in Atlanta that we have, we are in the midst of getting our first shot at a full wireless microphone setup. And that will become another pillar of our technology platform that'll give us a large advantage over other users or other implementers in this space.
No, that's incredible. Wireless does have its drawbacks, but if you can utilize it effectively, I imagine it'll be a huge strength for your company.
Yep.
How many patents did you have to get for this? But you recently just got a new patent, did you not, for AGL?
Yeah, we just got through a really, and I always try to, whenever I'm starting a company, I'm trying to look at, is there intellectual property that we can kind of put together? Because let's face it, whenever a young startup company is trying to raise money, you want to have, intellectual property moats that protect you. So another person can't just walk in and take it from you. So I started working back in, I think it was 2018 on this patent in the sound space. And a lot of it was about the ability to tag, sound clips and train those sound clips and then be able to continue to go through those cycles and then push those algorithms out to the edge environment. So the entire sound patent is around that space in a animal production environment. So it's we're excited with what we're able to accomplish with that patent, and we think it gives us broad capabilities. We took the patent first, we expedited it in the poultry space since that's where we're launching first. We're coming around with a secondary patent that then further takes it cleanly into the other livestock spaces. Things like our next space we're going to go into will be swine. Then we look to go into dairy and other spaces. The goodness is, we always think about the global marketplace we all live in. We think the U.S. here for poultry, and the U.S. poultry is big. But if you're to go look at China, China's probably 4 to 5 times our poultry production. So, and turkey speak here in the U.S. is similar turkey speak to that in China. So it's an interesting opportunity that once you build this platform, you get your algorithms right, and you've got that learning capability with sound. I think we've got a platform that can definitely extend into the global marketplace.
Aside from global domination, what to be in the position you're in, obviously you need an ability to go from 0 to 1, which you've proved a few times over, but you're also a bit of a dreamer, I imagine. So where do you see this technology leading? Obviously, besides refining your ability to identify, auditory markers that tell an algorithm what, section of a turkey house is stressed, or the swine house, or what have you. Where do you see this going, 5, 10, 15 years down the road? Are you still working on trying to get more specific with your identification to where maybe you can get closer and closer to being able to understand specific things that animals say? Like the work you started with, was it?
Vetrax.
Vetrax, yeah, Vetrax.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's going to be a need for individual management of animals at certain levels. At the end of the day, what we want to do, like in the poultry side or even the swine side, you're talking about large collections of animals together. And what we want, going back to what we said about the dogs, as an owner, I'd love to know my dog is happy. He's contentful. He's living the best life that he can, in the environment that he's in. And I think that's where we want to be able to get to that in the food animal space. And to be honest with you, what I'd love to be able to do is the ability to certify that animal welfare was done well for these animals. That this is a product that when you buy it, these animals were raised humanely, they're raised in good standards, and they had a contentful life in the environment they were in, and they everything was done right, and that we could be a standard for that as a certification. I mean, there's stuff going on, and I'm chasing stuff. There's a nonprofit organization called FFAR, and it's Foundation for Farm Animals, I think is the name for it. And they look at a lot of the welfare, sustainability type issues. We're looking at doing some grant work with them. And that's another, just another note for any of your entrepreneurs out there. There's sometimes you've got to go look for these grants to help sustain you at times, but they also become great things to propel business models without taking investment. So where you can own more of the company long term. So as you start going in after venture capital, you start giving away your equity in the business, where if I can get a grant, like we're talking about on FFAR, we can potentially propel ourselves to work with turkey producers, getting half, funded by this grant money and then mixed with industry monies with it. So, and we're looking at, as we do some of those grants, going after trying to build out these certifications, the ability to certify ourselves. And FFAR is, some of the companies that give them money are companies like, it's a McDonald's will throw several $1 million into part of the grant bucket for FFAR. So they're high sponsors into ensuring healthy welfare and sustainable animal production techniques and even measurements. So there's a lot of importance to making sure these large retail brands that we all know, it's important for them to be kind of a shepherds at the top of the food chain, to be able to measure that things are done right down below. Because when things are done bad down below, their brand has a chance to be done heavily damaged. And at the end of the day, we know it's not the way that animals should be produced. So we need it done right, and we need the tools to measure it being done right.
No, it sounds like you're providing exactly the thing that they need to make sure that the optics are good for their particular organization, especially in this day and age where people are becoming a lot more cognizant of the fact that animals need to be treated humanely. So hopefully that part catches on. The idea of artificial intelligence, especially with the use of sound, kind of fascinates me. It seems as if the applications for such a technology are limitless. I know that you guys, was it AGL that was working with sensors that worked with exit systems in a school to direct people away from danger?
Yeah, so there's so many different applications of sound. I mean, just think about, one of the things that probably a lot of the students have heard about in the past is you'll have police stations that will have microphones that may be triangulated in a downtown area or any area that may have a certain amount of risk, and the ability for a shot to be heard. So think about it, you're basically taking that sound of the shot, and that might very well be an AI algorithm sitting behind it. So I heard a shot, and then what it's doing is then it will triangulate to figure out where it heard the shot from, and it's going to feast a number of cameras in that area. So that's just one simple example of what sound does in those. Even just the ability for first responder response that you need, the ability to hear that something bad is happening or some risk element has escalated, to drive focus of cameras to then help do predictive modeling of what kind of resources you need to get out there on site to deal with it. Just like the subway event they had in New York, I guess it's a couple weeks ago, it's kind of really scary event. You want to be able to get first responders on there yesterday, as soon as you could hear something wrong. And they talked about, they didn't have cameras in place. Well, cameras and sound together could have helped, further identify the person and expedite response that much faster. So I think surveillance is going to be a big thing. Also even within, one area that we were looking at, and I went after an NSF grant, probably during COVID world. There's a lot of COVID grants out there and everyone remembers when we had nursing homes, these long-term retirement care type places, and we had the huge, impact to the elderly with respect to COVID. Well, we were looking at possibly going after one of those grants and trying to put the sound detection technology into that space. So the ability to listen for humans, vocalizing, coughing, sneezing, and being able to monitor and then be able to alert the staff, whether it's to quarantine people or to, just manage the risk in those kind of environments. So I think there's endless. You go back to Swiss Army type opportunities here on the human side. It could even be just, think about in a grocery store where someone knocks over something and the crash of things hitting the ground, and the store manager's got an app that's listening out there. Oh, we just had something weird happen over here. Potential, spill just occurred on, aisle 10. The ability to get people in there, mark off the area, secure the area, clean up, and act on things in a rapid fashion. So I could go on and on extended applications in this space. Beyond just the animal space is a personal passion for me. So that's one thing that excites me to play in this space. But the human side of the equation here is just as much to just look at, surveillance and security, and even just think about compliance and looking over. You had a senior parent who's at home, the ability to see and or hear that you're hearing the movements that you expect. You're not hearing stress sounds of someone calling for help or I've fallen. I know that everyone has heard about the help me I've fallen button. Well, let's face it, you don't always have the button. You'd like to be able to even call out and then boom, someone's there for you. Even if no one is there in the room with you. So,
and the thing that's fascinating about AI is that it can learn. So just basic monitoring, you just need a microphone, right? You just put a microphone anywhere near the person's room and you'd be able to hear if someone falls. Where the AI kind of becomes interesting is is not only picking up the sound of someone falling, but to be able to identify that it was a fall, be able to even maybe pick up how, from what height the fall happened, where in the room it happened, and can alert the doctors and maybe even make recommendations on what sort of preparations need to be done in response to said incident. Or, yeah, something
I
like.
mean, senior care is, I mean, let's face it, we've got an aging senior population out here. And even as just a child who's got a parent, I've got a father who's 86 years old. And there are so many times I'm just wondering, is he okay? Go back to just, is my dog happy? All right, is my dad okay? Has he not fallen down? Is he, can he, if I could just get a nice kind of an easy, unobtrusive check mark that he's moving around, he's out of the bed, he's gone in the kitchen, he's doing his daily thing. And whether it's sound that I can look for certain things, and maybe he doesn't like the idea of having a camera on him. Because one thing about cameras are people sometimes feel it's intrusive. Someone changes their clothes in front of the camera, whatever. They're like, oh my God. So think about sound kind of gives you a certain privacy.
Absolutely.
That cameras don't. So it's an interesting Swiss Army knife to deploy in areas, certain specific areas that could bring interesting value.
No, absolutely. I think that as an elderly person, I would have a huge problem with someone putting a camera in my room. But I'd feel a little bit more at peace if I were to have at least doctors monitoring my being through sound. I think that would be just fine.
And I don't even know if it's necessarily even a doctor, Brian. It could be just as simple as you've got, a family member of yours that wants the check mark that, I get a mobile app alert in, hey, Brian's on the move. He's all good.
Yeah.
Or have not seen Brian in, 8 hours. Expected to see him, maybe give him a call. Just that kind of like a jolt, just as a family support, or even as think about, you could almost build a virtual support center of people in this kind of mode where they would share support for each other.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of an innovative business model where if we could just help each other as a community to just keep up and, because let's face it, there's not infinite money for a lot of people to go play and support. There could be some interesting models that could be very cost effective for keeping up and making sure people are okay.
No, that's excellent. So I think we're gonna start taking questions from the audience if there are any. But in the meantime, it seems as if you've got a business model that's sustainable just working with animals, but the possibility for expansion into other realms is almost limitless. It's pretty amazing.
No, there's a lot that can be done here, and it's a little bit up to your imagination. You can just see, I'm sitting here, I just imagined one right there, the ability of a organic, senior supports, capability. It's almost like its own little social network in a way to just know that you're okay and have that kind of, network in place. But it's really up to some creative people who are going to go, I heard this today. This guy is doing this stuff on animals. What if I took it here? And what could I train to hear something that's very important that builds a new business proposition?
Yeah. Do you find that the algorithm? This is just something I thought of. Do you find that the algorithm sometimes struggles with the microphones that are used? I imagine that in a turkey house, you can't just use any old or like an expensive microphone. It's going to take a lot of dust and debris and dirt. How do you choose the best possible microphone for the scenario, for the environment in which it
Well, you can imagine what's traumatizing me a little bit right now is I'm getting ready to go to this wireless microphone cycle.
Yeah.
And it's forcing a change for me on the microphone. So I'm going to be experiencing that front up,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to create me some pain on the algorithm side. I've already had, one of my advisors has told me, you can use the base that you've got, but you'll be adding new training data on top of it using these new microphones, and it will get better and better. But it will cause additional trainings as you bring in different microphones. So ideally, and we're, you can imagine in our environment, this microphone, I mean, a animal production environment, you've got high ammonia in the air. They do complete wash down using antibacterial type wash sprays, high pressure washes. These microphones have to survive that kind of environment. And that's one of the reasons we're going to this new microphone. This new microphone has a lot better protection to that wash down and durability long term. But your question is, how does that impact your algorithms? I think it will, and it will take additional, training to get them back up to where we were on the old microphones.
Understood. Cool. Well, awesome, Marcel. I want to thank you so much for coming by and talking a little bit about AGL and your background and how you're using sound to be able to effectively, interpret animal behavior. So thank you so much for your time.
No, Brian, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the students here. Hopefully, maybe someone who's got an entrepreneurial bug is going to say, I think I could go build this, and goes off and tries it.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Be a fearless learner, an always learner. That would be my parting shot for you guys.
I think it's a great mentality for sure. All right. So take care, Marcel, and we'll chat soon.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye. We good?
Yep. Assigning program. There you go. And hold. And we're up.
All right. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool.